Welcome to the Times of Industry show. I honestly don't do enough of these, but today's guest is going to be the start of a series of interviews that we're going to do with people that are some of the best examples of American enterprise in the 21st century and how things are going right now and what's working right now. And I'm going to pose some very hard questions, creative questions his way. If you're not familiar with Jeff Hoffman, he's very well known for some of the companies that he's been involved with, mainly Priceline.com, Ubid, Collar Jar. He's a frequent keynote speaker on the topics of innovation, entrepreneurship, business leadership. He's been featured on Fox News, Fox Business, CNN, CNN International, Bloomberg, Forbes, ABC, you name it. Jeff, I really want to thank you for coming on the show and being ready to answer some very tough questions here.
Absolutely. I think these are important questions to answer, so I'm glad to be here to help in any way I can.
I want to first ask you, look, in the past year, we've seen several American self-made billionaires, specifically from the finance hedge fund industry, Ray Dalio, Leon Cooperman, Jeff Gundlach, and others, talking about the need to reform capitalism or the need to reform the lack of opportunity for the young generation entering the workforce and just the lack of mobility in moving from the lower income brackets to the higher income brackets. Some studies show that only 1 out of 7 people that are born into the lower demographics ever make it up the ladder. They're talking about the fact that there's a service-driven jobs market which comprise of many dead-end careers with low income and limited upside, challenging tuition crisis, the student loan debt, in other words, where tens of millions either can't afford college or can't afford paying back college. And they are talking about a lack of real opportunity to become wealthy in America, or B, a lack of inequality in terms of the way to become wealthy in today's America. In other words, do you think that they're talking about their specific industries or the way that they specifically became wealthy? Is that blocked for new people? Or do you think in general there is a problem right now in America for the majority to become successful?
Okay, so first of all, let's go back to 100,000 feet for your listeners right now, because if you're listening to that and you think that's you probably already aren't going to make it. And the reason that I say that is a huge piece of success. Well, this is the way I always frame it, is attitude. I always tell people your attitude determines your outcome. So if you're focused on that list of things that make it hard, and I'm going to put in quote marks, excuses, then you're already behind. Entrepreneurs, you're right that statistically it's much harder to start at the bottom and climb to the top. But if you don't think you're exceptional and capable of getting there, you're not going to be one of those few that make it anyway. So I have 2 parts to my answer to your question. First is, yes, it's hard and it could use some reform. But the second is that entrepreneurs and winners are the people that just find a way anyway. So I'm going to give you an example. You talk about college debt, right? It's hard coming out of college. You need that education. It helps you get a head start in business, but then you carry all this debt with you. Or here's plan B. I was broke, didn't come from any money, single mom, and I started a little business in college and paid for it. I did a startup and I paid my way through college, so I didn't leave with a lot of debt. So your only option is not to get a lot of debt. Your option is to figure out how to be innovative, maybe start a business while you're a student, which means you're going to work twice as hard as everyone else, which turns out to be one of the common elements of people who do climb out of the hole they're in and achieve great success, is they outworked everybody and they believed they could. So again, 2 parts to this. Do we need to reform the student loan and debt situation? I think absolutely. It could use some help. Does college and universities need to redefine their value equation and prove to young people that it's worth going to college? Because I think it is, but I don't think they're doing enough to prove that their costs and their debt are worth it. I believe that has to be done too. But if you believe that you are exceptional, you believe you are destined for success, and if you in fact really are a winner, you will find a way. Again, I came out of nothing and I found a way to finance my education by creating a startup. I found a way to create my own jobs and my own opportunities instead of waiting for the system to make it easier for me to succeed. I just went off and did it myself. And so there's plenty of opportunity. It is just plain hard. And I think you're right that some of those people that are saying that, they're talking from their experience. They're talking about the obstacles they faced to get there and what might have made it easier for them. And that may or may not apply to your personal situation, to our listeners, but there's always a way and there's always an opportunity. It's just harder maybe than it used to be, but anything is still possible.
Jeff, I want to ask you about some of the most exciting sectors and industries that are currently frozen, in your opinion, and are ripe for progress, ripe for innovation. So that's part one of the question. Part two is, in your experience, what inspires a person to have that moment where he says, aha, this industry, I think it's going to be, it needs a new product, it needs a new service, it needs a new this and that. How do you get to a point where you say, oh my God, I can't believe we're using CDs. What about an iPad, an iPod, etc.? How does one reach that? Either in his local community where he says, hey, this is not serviced enough in my own backyard, or internationally. Talk to me a little bit about what goes through the minds of such a person, and industries that you think are right now good for opportunity.
Sure. So let's do the second question first. The second part of the question is, how does this happen and when and where? And the first thing, again, for anybody listening, to be looking for is inefficiency. By the way, for me, part of the reason I became an entrepreneur is just I'm the most impatient person on the planet. And I know that's a flaw I need to fix, but my impatience causes me to absolutely hate inefficiency. So whenever I'm doing anything in any industry, I'm the guy in line that everyone's glaring at. The guy that's saying, come on, how could this possibly take this long? So what I'm telling you is, most of the time, it's somebody that's looking at inefficiency of something and saying, this is ridiculous. There has to be an easier way to do this. And most of the time, that comes from your own personal experience. Someplace that you were standing, that you were frustrated, that you were deep in the middle of the problem. I'll give you an example. My very first startup was being in an airport where I was waiting in line to check in way back then for a flight. You had to check in to get a boarding pass from a human being at the ticket counter. And it took so long that I actually missed the flight. And I was upset. And I'm standing there in a crowded airport, just finished an hour-long wait just to getting boarding pass. And I'm standing there saying, this is insanely inefficient. There has got to be a better way. I'm right in the middle of the problem. And so my first startup, by the way, one of my first products ever was designing the check-in kiosks that you use at an airport today that wound up in airports all over the world. And it's because I was personally frustrated in that situation. So look, next time you find yourself frustrated in any situation, and look around and see a lot of other people see it, and you recognize that this industry or this operation or process is really inefficient, that's a great opportunity for you. And you asked about a couple of industries. We obviously went after travel because it was inefficient, but I'll tell you two that excite me today, and this is only two, there's lots, but education and healthcare are old paradigms, dinosaur technology. They're critically important to every human being. You mentioned globally as well as locally. They're international global markets that everybody needs fixed. So if you go study inefficiencies in our healthcare and in our healthcare system all over the world, or study it in the educational system, and then on the other side, you look at new technologies, I believe many people are going to have massive success in streamlining those and innovating those industries, as an example.
Interesting. I love actually what you're talking about with regards to healthcare and education, because and part of the reason is a lot of that has to do with the government, and these are two industries that are basically dominated by government intervention. So there's definitely inefficiencies all over it, and I'd love to see it privatized in some way. Do you feel it's better in today's world, especially in North America or Europe, in the developed world, to focus everything and all your energy and everything that you have as an employee, for example, on one main career? Or do you think it's better to develop a part-time home-based business as well, like a secondary income or a secondary and third income? Most careers today, they take between 15 to 25, maybe even 30 years to reach their maximum wages, their peak earning years. And so people that are 25 or 30, um, and they're just, they're out of college, they have very low income jobs, etc. They're getting into, they're getting married late, they're starting families late, they're paying down debts late, they're buying homes late. What's the solution to this problem? Do you think it's secondary income streams, or do you think there's other ways? Because obviously the jobs market in today's world is built towards the ages of 45 to 50, where you get to that peak earning years.
Sure. So the first part of answering that question is that you got to ask yourself the longer term question. What is your long-term goal? Because I'll answer that differently. If somebody's long-term goal is to remain a corporate employee for their whole career, it's a different answer. So I'm gonna take this one first. If your goal is to achieve, financial independence and wealth, then I am not at all a fan of a side hustle. And the reason is, for either case, your side hustle gets your secondary income stream gets only part of your attention, part-time. And the key, I've studied this with so many people, the key to success is focus. It's being all in. I remember the first time I met Elon Musk, he said to me, if Tesla dies or SpaceX dies, I'm done, because I'm all in. Everything I have is in, this was Tesla at the time, is in that company. Successful entrepreneurs take risks and they laser focus. They put all their focus on one thing. So if your goal is to achieve that independent wealth, then I don't like the side hustle. I always tell people, you're going to have to jump. There's a saying that says being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and trying to build an airplane on the way down. Right? You don't know what's going to happen. But the ones that have succeeded because they quit their corporate job and they gave every bit of their attention to making their startup, their entrepreneurial idea, their invention successful. That's how they became independently wealthy. If, on the other hand, you do want to stay in a corporation the rest of your life, then I'm not opposed to having something on the side. I know a lot of people that do everything from real estate investing on the side of their corporate job to, I know somebody that gets up at 2 a.m. and she trades currencies to make side money. There's a lot of ways to protect yourself against an economic downturn, or just getting laid off from a company you thought you were going to be with forever. So again, the key to success, but even then, I will say that your corporate job and your corporate career path is probably not going to do as well if you're distracted by your side hustle as the person sitting next to you that spends every free moment, every waking moment focusing on how to succeed in that company. So I am generally a big believer in doing one thing at a time and giving it everything you got. And especially if you want to achieve independent wealth by being an entrepreneur, it's extremely difficult to do that while you're still a corporate employee.
This reminds me of two very early, not early, but 20 years ago at least, where I heard Warren Buffett talking about writing the 25 most important goals of your life. He says, write that list, scratch those 24. Don't even think about it. Just, you need to be on one. And then right after that, they asked both him and Gates to write the most important word in business on a piece of paper and then flip. And they both wrote focus. It was insane.
I completely agree with that.
And then thirdly, I think really importantly, he talked about how many businesses does he invest in. He says, look, if I could, I would invest, Berkshire Hathaway would invest in around 3 businesses. That's it. If I could find 3 businesses, I wouldn't need to own 100 subsidiaries, etc. And he said, even my own money, all my wealth is in one business, Berkshire Hathaway. I don't, and of course we know. Yeah, I love that. I love focus. And I want to ask you about something that's very current since we're in 2020 election year. And we see a lot of voices talking about free healthcare, debt jubilee for the student loans, and many other forms of socialistic ideas in America. Do you fear the rise of socialism, the rise in extremity in social? Is this something that you think, not in terms of like finance or investing or anything, but just socially? Is this a problem in your opinion?
The answer is yes, I do fear it. I'm afraid, especially in America, that we're getting soft. And what I mean by that is free enterprise has always worked, right? The reason that, a 200 and something year old country came out of nowhere and became the world's #1 economic power, superpower, whatever, I believe was because competition creates markets. Competition brings prices down, makes things accessible. The more that a government stays out of the way and allows free enterprise to find solutions and competition to drive prices down, the people win. I just fundamentally believe that. And the socialism thing worries me because as you start to normalize everybody, you start to get to, and this is a very editorial opinion, you start to get to this everybody gets a trophy thing that we're doing now. I don't think we breed a nation of winners and people that compete by giving every kid a trophy, even if one kid stayed after practice every day, outworked everybody, and was the best player, right? So I think the edges of just making people soft. You don't have to try that hard. You don't have to really work that hard or compete. You don't have to stay after for extra credit in life. I don't believe all that stuff. I think those things made this a great country. And yes, I am worried that a push towards socialism tends to try to normalize everybody, and it just makes us weaker. Free enterprise and competition create markets, and they ultimately serve the customer because the people get to choose who they want at what price they want. It worries me.
I love that answer. Actually, I really do. I think it's dead on. I consider having a partner one of the most basic initial steps in building a successful enterprise. To me, I would never venture into any business if I didn't have another person accountable with me, and also someone that can make up for some of the stuff that I can't do or don't have time, etc. In other words, without a core nucleus or a mastermind group, in my opinion, it's impossible to build a business. Is that, in your opinion, true? True to an extent? How important is it? How much do you teach that is something that is necessary?
Okay, so first of all, nobody that's ever created anything great in the world did so alone. You cannot succeed without a team around you. So yes, it's completely true. You can't do it by yourself. The sooner you figure out that each of us only has one talent. I've never met an engineer who also does all our marketing campaigns and then does our taxes, right? Likewise, we don't ask our accountant to write code. Every one of us, we're good at something. You might be a finance person, a marketing person, an operations person, whatever you are, but you're not 7 things, so quit trying to be and quit pretending you are. Figure out what you're good at and then surround yourself with people smarter than you at every other area. You cannot succeed alone.
Jeff, how do you attract them? How do you attract these people? How do you find people? Let's say I'm here in my own office or whatever. I'm looking for that other person who is as excited as I am, as ambitious as I am, etc. How do I find him or her?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a great question. And the mistake everybody makes is they talk about themselves. They say, hey, here's the thing. I'm trying to do what I'm excited about, my vision, my dream. Come join me. And you're leaving another person saying, just because that's your dream doesn't make it mine. The way that you find people is to start by asking them to talk about themselves, not about you. Sitting down with people and saying, what is your vision? What is your long term? What is your dream? It's a cultural fit, not a resume fit.
So do you go to conferences? Do you go to networking events? How do you just get into the sphere of good people?
Another good question. They are never going to find you. You have to go find them. Sitting at home behind a computer is not the way to find amazing people. Going out in the world and meeting them. going to one time in my life, I went to an HR conference, and I don't know anything about HR. I've never been in it. I don't know it and I don't do it. I went there because our company was growing, and I was like, I need to find somebody that knows HR. They're not going to wander into your office and say, I'm great at HR. Do you need me? So you got, yes, you go, you network, you go to conferences, you go to events, and sometimes you go to events you wouldn't normally go to. When I went to that HR event, I went there specifically because guess what? That's where all the people in the HR business were. And that's where I found somebody that can run HR for us. Get out and network.
Okay, so last question. This is a very creative question. Tell me what you think. Somebody comes to you today, he or she, 35 to 50 years old, for example, lives in America, lives in today's America, not in any big city. So we're not talking
Sure.
like New York City or LA, more of the heartland, etc. Paycheck to paycheck, tells you, look, I have all the ambition. I'm willing to change my life. I'm willing to be coached. I'm willing to listen to someone like you. Mentor me, help me to become financially secured in 3 to 7 years here. And what would you teach them? What are some of the most important things that you would tell them to do? How do they spend their 16 waking hours a day?
All right. So first I have to qualify something. That's a great question, but I am not in the financial business. I'm not a financial advisor. So I can't answer, somebody that says, even though I only have a little bit of money, how should I invest it? Where should I put it? I can't answer that. I don't
Oh,
do that.
no, not investing at all.
Okay.
How would they
Yeah.
spend their waking hours building businesses or finding
Okay.
the right career path, etc.?
Sure. So the business part, the entrepreneurial part, that's the piece, that's the space where I live. And what I would tell them is two things. The first is find a problem to solve. Find an inefficiency or in a market, something that's being done poorly or not being done at all, that a need, a hole, a gap, a space that you can fill. In the same way that in companies I was involved in, we said the travel industry is inefficient. Consumers should not have to call airlines and hotels and travel agents. Let them just book their own travel by looking at the options. We eliminated the entire middle layer of an inefficient industry. So find a problem to solve. I was, had that situation with I'm going to give you a crazy example. These were pretty poor young students. I'm sorry, not young. These were engineers whose degree they'd been students and got engineering degrees, work in engineering companies. But this was in Cairo, Egypt, and they were complaining every day about the traffic. And I'm over there saying, find a problem to solve. So they wound up creating a traffic app that in the Middle East now 60 million people use. They solved a real problem. So that's the first piece, is find a problem and an inefficiency that you can fix to solve. But the second piece is, in terms of finding a career path, is you really do need to focus on your passions. What is it that you love to do? What are you good at doing? If you know that you're a people person and you feel comfortable when you're presenting to people, then you need to get out of this, whatever, accounting, engineering cubicle and get into the marketing side of business. When you are doing something you're passionate about, that old saying is true. You do it so much better. Your energy comes across, your attitude and enthusiasm. You're a happier person. And that energy is reflected out into the world. You get back from the universe the energy you put into it. When you're doing something you love, everybody can feel it. So you really do need to explore what makes me happy, what doesn't make me happy, and go out and try some things. But in the end, to really become successful and wealthy, you need to be valuable to the people that you want to be around, the industry you want to be around. You want those people to be pulling out their wallets and their credit cards, trying to give you money. And that only happens when you have a solution to a problem that they really need somebody to solve. So pay attention to your passions and go out in the industry you're passionate about and study it until you can find a problem to solve that makes you valuable to everybody because you have a solution that they need. When you follow that path, that's the path to both, a fulfilling and happy career, but to financial success as well.
Jeff, last question. People want to check out more of your work. What are you doing right now? Stay up to date. Or just listeners who want to get in touch, that they like the interview, they want to know more about your speaking engagements and whatever else you're doing. How can they get involved? Where can they reach out?
Sure. So my simple email is just jeff@jeffhoffman.com. I also have a website, jeffhoffman.com, and I am most active on LinkedIn. So you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. Email me, jeff@jeffhoffman.com, or you can see more about the work we do at that website, jeffhoffman.com.
Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time today, and
Sure.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.